Having said that, this is my pleasure to introduce Professor Ricardo Castro. He is associate professor of our Department of Critical Care here in the Catholic University, Department of Intensive Care Medicine. He, in his background, he has a MPH degree by the University of Pittsburgh, working with Derek Angus a couple of years, some years ago, and also PhD from the Erasmus Rotterdam University. And he works, of course, in septic shock, but we call him our vascular physiologist. And he will speak today about his 25 years of research in septic shock resuscitation trials. By the way, we produce a manuscript about this, a conceptual perspective that is under review, containing the same topics that Ricardo will address today. Thank you very much, Ricardo, for being with us.
Thank you, Glenn. Hello, everyone. I'd like to know if you are listening to me well.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to share the screen.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you. So we're going to speak about half an hour or so about the 25 years of septic shock resuscitation. And I want you to look at this slide for a moment before I say anything clinical. These images span the same 25 years we are here to discuss. And let us remember that in 2001, the world was struck by September 11. 3 years later, Gmail was invented, a technology that would reshape how all of us communicate, including science. In 2010, a catastrophic earthquake devastated Chile. By 2014, social fractures erupted in protests around the world. In 2019 and 20, the Brexit reshaped the political map of Europe. In 2002, Russia invaded Ukraine. And today, 2025, 26, we navigate the USA-China trade confrontation, whose consequences are still unfolding. And my point is simple. The world you see on this slide is not the world of 2001. And all things are fundamentally different. And the same happens with our topic, septic shock resuscitation. But the world did not accumulate years. The world was transformed. And so the same happened with septic shock resuscitation. What we believed in 2001 about oxygen delivery targets, about lactate, how to give fluids, etc., is not what we believe today. So the field was not merely refined at the margins, it was reconceptualized completely. So I want you to hold on to that thought. 25 years is not a long time in human history, but it is long enough for the ground to shift completely beneath our assumptions. And that is precisely what happened in this field. So 25 years ago, Rivers published one of the most influential trials in septic shock resuscitation, the early gall-directed therapy. It was bold, a single-center protocolized algorithm targeting central venous oxygen saturation as a surrogate of the oxygen delivery to consumption ratio. It worked, showing a striking mortality benefit in very seriously ill patients. What followed was a quarter century of remarkable scientific activity, trials that taken individually often disappointed. I want to emphasize this. But collectively, these trials shape a far more sophisticated understanding of shock physiology. The narrative is not one of failure. It's one of progressive conceptual refinement. Each trial was a stepping stone, not a dead end. So let's walk, if you allow me to say that, through this evolution. First, we have SCDO2. SCDO2 is elegant in its logic. It summarizes in a single number the balance between oxygen delivery and consumption, accessible from a central venous catheter. And the problem was in the translation from signal to target. 4 developments contributed to this sort of fall. First, later studies conducted in ICU found that the very low SCDO2 values Rivers reported below 70% were uncommon. So the intervention was targeting a problem that did not exist anymore because the standard care and earlier recognition had improved the care of these patients. And second, physiological work established that the CVO2 is non-dichotomous. It's not good or bad. Supranormal values, which occur in distributive shock with impaired microvascular oxygen extraction, carry a spurious prognosis as low values. Third, critically, the EGDT protocol embedded several practices we now recognize as harmful, potentially harmful. Liberal transfusion thresholds, aggressive fluid administrations, elevated CBP targets. And fourth, 3 rigorous multicenter trials, the process, the ARISE, and the PROMISE, tested this algorithm against contemporary usual care and found no difference. But the failure was not of early protocolized sepsis. That's not wrong. But a specific algorithm anchored to a target whose physiological validity had become questionable was the problem. Importantly, SCVO2 should not be abandoned as a physiological signal. A low SCVO2 at the bedside still informs us about VO2-VO2 ratio, but the error was treating it as a standalone target than as one variable in a richer hemodynamic assessment. Now we come to lactate. Lactate holds a paradoxical role in septic shock physiology. It is a strong prognostic biomarker in sepsis, yet using its kinetics as a real-time resuscitation target is unreliable and potentially harmful. The conceptual error lies in conflating prognostic signal with the therapeutic target. From the late 1990s, we learned that lactate was more than an anaerobic end product. It is a mobile metabolic intermediate and oxidizable fuel, a substrate for hepatic gluconeogenesis. And in sepsis, hyperlactatemia arises from at least 4 partially independent mechanisms: tissue hypoxia, adrenergic-driven aerobic glycolysis, impaired hepatic and renal clearance, and mitochondrial dysfunction. So the clinical consequence of this mechanistic heterogeneity is that lactate kinetics are slow, variable, and context-dependent. Beyond the first hours of resuscitation, pursuing lactate normalization risks iatrogenic escalation in patients whose lactate is driven by mechanisms that hemodynamic interventions cannot address. The lactate trial, which targeted a 20% decrease every 2 hours, illustrated this precisely. The intervention arm received more fluids and vasodilators, yet lactate kinetics were essentially identical in both groups. The pre-specified target was met equally, regardless of treatment assignment. So the lesson is not to abandon lactate measurement. It retains enormous value for diagnosis, risk stratification, and triage. The lesson is about the limitations of converting any single metabolic signal into an actionable resuscitation endpoint without fully understanding its temporal dynamics. Now, the capillary refill time. CRT is not new. Clinicians have assessed peripheral perfusion at the bedside for decades. And I put a screenshot here of the first report, that came from Lieutenant Colonel Henry Beecher in the Annals of Surgery, writing about war casualties. And what changed in the early 2010s was the conceptual reframing from CRT as a static marker of shock severity to as a dynamic resuscitation endpoint with favorable kinetics. So 2 lines of evidence drove this shift. First, Barker and colleagues demonstrated the clinical prognostic significance of rapid peripheral perfusion normalization and a pilot study that suggested CRT normalization as a signal to safety stop fluid resuscitation. And second, our own observational work published in 2014 showed that CRT responds within minutes of effective hemodynamic interventions in septic shock survivors with a kinetic profile far superior to lactate. And this paved the way for ANDROMEDA shock, a study that was designed to test whether targeting this rapid peripheral perfusion signal would outperform lactate-targeted resuscitation over an 8-hour intervention period. The trial showed a strong and clinically meaningful trend toward reduced 28-day mortality, 8.5 absolute percentage points, and a significant reduction in organ dysfunction. The Bayesian reanalysis assigned a 92% probability of CRT superiority within a survival benefit in all scenarios. I want to highlight that three design elements deserve emphasis. The standardized CRT assessment technique reduced inter-rated variability. Second, the systematic assessment of fluid responsiveness before each fluid bolus, which averted fluid administration in 25% of assessments. And this, moreover, operationalized the concept of fluid stewardship that was concurrent to this. And three, the vasopressor and inodilator tests that represented for the first time in septic shock trials reversible hemodynamic interventions whose continuation depended on achieving the perfusion target. Now we have the dilemma of mean arterial pressure targets. The 65 millimeters of mercury target entered resuscitation algorithms largely by consensus based on the physiological principle that most vascular beds lose autoregulation below this threshold, and it became as the de facto benchmark in both research and practice. The fundamental problem is that mean arterial pressure is a composite variable. It encodes cardiac output and multiple vascular properties in one single number. Two patients with identical mean arterial pressure readings may have radically different hemodynamic states and regional perfusion profiles. Sepsis-PAM addressed this directly, targeting 80 to 85 versus 65 to 70 millimeters of mercury. But it found no overall mortality benefit. And critically, the standard arm was actually maintained at approximately 75 millimeters of mercury, so way above the intended target. Also, the significant increase in new onset atrial fibrillation in the high mean arterial pressure group was a warning signal. But yet, in the chronic hypertensive subgroup, higher mean arterial pressure was linked to less renal replacement therapy. So it showed, again, the heterogeneity in our patients. The mechanistic explanation is much clearer now. It's probably the critical closing pressure that determines the tissue perfusion pressure. Critical closing pressure varies between organs, patients, and over the time course of sepsis. Effective tissue perfusion pressure is mean arterial pressure minus a threshold we cannot currently measure at bedside for now. This makes vasopressor titration individual, inherently personalized. So the future likely lies not in targeting a fixed map alone, a value, but in using control map increments as short diagnostic tests, the suppressor tests, to identify the patient who will genuinely benefit from higher perfusion pressure. Again, applying a single autoregulatory map threshold is overly simplistic, and the solution was not there. Now we move to fluid stewardship and the danger of overload. Few aspects of critical care practice have been more dramatically transformed in the last 25 years than fluid therapy. The transition from aggressive loading culture of the 90s, epitomized by EGDT's 5 liters in 6 hours, to contemporary fluid stewardship represent one of the most consequential shifts in how we think about hemodynamic support. The conceptual support for this shift came progressively. Mulbrain and colleagues characterized the pathophysiology of fluid accumulation and secondary abdominal compartment syndrome in the mid-2000s. The ROSE framework, resuscitation, optimization, stabilization, evacuation, provided a temporal structure, a very helpful structure for fluid decisions across the sepsis trajectory, similar to the SOSD framework by Bonzon and De Bagger. Fluid responsive assessment, again, mainly via passive leg raising and expiratory occlusion and pulse pressure variation, became the criterion for fluid administration. So it is, alongside fluid responsiveness assessment, has played an enormous and very important role in this conceptualization. The Finnish international cohort study revealed that these tools were underused in routine practice. So against this backdrop, the classic study tested whether even more aggressive restriction, limiting fluids to narrow and extreme criteria, would improve outcomes compared to contemporary usual care. The trial's neutral results should be interpreted carefully. The usual care arm was already restricted by historical standards. The extreme criteria in the restrictive arm, mercury pressure below 50, lactate above 4, modeling score above 2, may have withheld potentially beneficial fluid in some patients. And critically, fluid responsiveness was not assessed before randomization. So many patients may have been harmed or helped regardless of their hemodynamic profile. But the classic result does not refute fluid stewardship. It demonstrates the challenge of testing an extreme intervention against a moving usual care baseline. I remember Derek Angus say in the PROMISE meeting, Monday mornings at 11 a.m. in Pittsburgh, usual care is not usual care anymore because their control group was having the same outcomes than the intervention group. So we have a moving usual care baseline, and the necessity of individualizing fluid decisions is far more important now rather than applying population level thresholds. So, personalization. ANDROMEDA Shock 2 represents the most comprehensive attempt to date to operationalize personalized hemodynamic resuscitation in septic shock. It was a conceptual step change from a stepwise protocol using a single perfusion target, ANDROMEDA Shock or ANDROMEDA Shock 1, as sometimes we call it. It moved from this, a single target, to a multi-layered phenotype-driven algorithm that adapted to the patient's evolving pathophysiology in real time. The CRT, PHR, personalized hemodynamic resuscitation, the CRT PHR algorithm works through sequential tiers. The first act was identifying an abnormal CRT. After that, the pulse pressure assessment allowed the identification of a probable low stroke volume. After that, identification of the vasoplegic phenotype by assessing diastolic arterial pressure, allowed the AP-triggered norepinephrine titration. And importantly, fluid responsiveness assessment was mandatory before any fluid bodies using passive erasing or end expiratory occlusion. Approximately half of patients entering with prolonged CRT normalized at this tier after appropriate fluid administration. The second trial deployed basic critical care echocardiography to identify cardiac dysfunction, a substantial proportion normalized after target cardiac intervention. If not, the indication was a test of vasopressor or dobutamine to assess perfusion responsiveness. So at every step, the protocol stopped when CRT normalized. The results were mechanistically informative. CRT normalization was achieved in 86% of the CRT PHR arm versus 62% in usual care. The primary hierarchical composite favors CRT PHR, driven principally by a shorter duration of vital support, organ support. This is not a small technical detail because let's think on this. It means the algorithm was effective in both achieving the perfusion target and translating that physiological success into reduced organ failure burden. So it's a translational study before our eyes happening in real time. So I would emphasize that ANDROMEDA Shock 2 should be viewed as a proof of concept and a launching platform, not a final answer. The algorithm itself requires refinement, of course, validation in other settings, integration with implementation science tool that ensure its reliable delivery across the entire sepsis patient population. So don't get afraid of this complex figure, but we could say that 25 years of septic shock trials reveal this confiding but important pattern. The strategies focused on fixed, isolated physiological targets consistently fail to improve patient outcomes. Not because interventions were wrong, but because the frameworks were reductionist. Septic shock is heterogeneous, dynamic, context-dependent, and treating it as a homogeneous condition fit for a universal algorithm was the fundamental error of many trials. Now we should resist the temptation to treat any single trial result as definitive. ANDROMEDA Shock 2 represents an important step in the right direction. The algorithm tested in this trial was the most sophisticated we have deployed so far, yet it still contains assumptions that require validation, as I said. And many parameters require refinement. Implementation challenges, again, remain unresolved in ordinary ICU practices. I would say that 3 frontiers demand attention. Physiologically, we need a better mechanistic understanding of what CRT non-response means and how to respond appropriately to each patient that does not respond. Methodologically, perhaps adaptive platform trials with pre-specified phenotype enrichment strategies may be better suited to test individualized intervention than traditional parallel RCTs. In implementation science, the gap between trial-enrolled patients' care and that of average septic shock patients at institutions remains a critical and a recognized source of preventable mortality, still under study. And third, artificial intelligence assists phenotyping, identifying real-time hemodynamic signatures, nice word, signatures from continuous waveform data or monitors information. It's an exciting prospect from the next decade, but must be developed and validated with rigor. So I could say that we've come a long way from River's single center emergency department in 2001. The field is more sophisticated, but at the same time, more physiologically honest and more patient-centered than it was a quarter century ago. The journey is not complete. The direction is clear toward precision, personalization, and the recognition, time and again, that septic shock is not one disease, but many. I have 2 more slides. So I want to close by going back to this slide that has no equations, no trials, no data. And again, in 2001, the world had not yet imagined September 11. It had not imagined Brexit or the Chilean or many other earthquakes or AI. None of it was predictable from what existed. And yet, looking back, each disruption carried a coherent logic, an internal pressure, I put it that way, an internal pressure that had been building until the old structure could no longer contain it. The same is true for what we have reviewed today. The pressure that dismantled GDT was not a single trial. It was the accumulation of physiological knowledge, physiological skepticism, failed replications, and the realization that a surrogate variable could not be the answer for every patient on every continent, on every phase of shock. The pressure that elevated CRT was not enthusiasm from a simple bedside test. It was the recognition that perfusion at the microcirculation level had been systematically excluded from our resuscitation endpoints. And the pressure that produced ANDROMEDA Shock 2 was the accumulated evidence that septic shock is not one disease, that mean treatment effects obscure the patients who are harmed, and that personalization is not a luxury, but a physiological necessity. So what does the next 25 years demand? I would say that not another trial testing a fixed target against usual care, certainly not. Not another protocol that assumes the average patient is the relevant patient. No, not anymore. What it demands is a science of heterogeneity. It demands implementation infrastructure capable of delivering the structure, physiologically guided care to the patient who arrives at 3 a.m. in a community hospital without a research team, with no every monitor that exists. That's the challenge. And it demands the intellectual humility now to recognize that whatever framework we build today will itself be dismantled, not because we were wrong to build it, but because the pressure of evidence will eventually find its structural limits. And that's how it should be. So 25 years ago, a world did not yet know what was already forming. The same is true now. We don't know. But the question is not whether the next transformation will come. It's whether we will have built the scientific foundations to recognize it when it does. And my last slide. This is the visual answer, I would say, to every world event on slide 2. All of the history, geopolitical ruptures, technological revolutions, social fractures, everything ultimately compresses down to this. One patient, one team, one clinician, one decision. So I would finish by saying that is what the 25 years were about, one patient. And that is what the next 25 years will be about. A patient, our patients, a clinician, a shift, a decision. Thank you very much.
Whoa, thank you. It was, ¿por qué no se ven todas las caras? Bueno, it was a really brilliant masterclass. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ricardo, for this very enlightening lecture, where it's not easy to summarize what happened in the last 25 years, no? And this was very interesting when we realized some time ago that it was exactly 25 years, the period from EGDT trial, Rivers trial, and Andromeda 2, 25 years. 25 years is, I mean, many people that work with us in the ICU are 25 years old. some residents, the nurses, etc. So 25 years is a long period of time in the personal life, but a very short time in the human lifetime, the period. So I want you to comment something. What makes me happy, tremendously happy, is that all the progress, the conceptual progress along these 25 years, ending up with the first step in personalization. The first step is just the beginning of a new approach. And with basically Andromeda 2 demonstrated that it is feasible to try to personalize with simple tools, bedside tools, pulse pressure, diastolic pressure, fluid responsiveness assessment, selective echo in some specific points, etc., etc. The progress has been driven by this. Compare to other specialties where the progress has been driven by advancing in technological devices.
Right. Yes.
Think about the progress. For example, I don't want to make
comparisons.
Comparison, but imagine progress in
surgery,
laparoscopic surgery, where you can operate people from across continents, as happened recently. In progress in cardiology, I mean, cardiac support, mechanical, I mean, it's impressive. The gastroenterologists with all this progress in endoscopic techniques, etc. But in ICU, the only technological thing that you mentioned was the emergence of POCUS. POCUS, and POCUS is, I mean, everybody now, young people, residents, they learn POCUS, basic POCUS, and this has been a tremendous, the single technological aspect during this 25 years has been the massive emergence of POCUS.
More important than cardiac output monitors.
Yeah, and the real necessity of invasive cardiac output monitors, etc., has been shut down because of the emergence of POCUS, not only in the arterial side, not only in the heart initial assessment, but also in the venous congestion concept. So if you think, we have progressed with concepts, fluid responsiveness assessment, the use in Andromeda 2 pulse pressure, the neglected diastolic arterial pressure that has been emerging, the emergence of this concept of challenging the cardiovascular system with short-term, reversible, physiological, acute hemodynamic tests with the vasopressor test, blah, blah, blah. And a better knowledge about physiology, the risk of fluids, the fluid tolerance concept. I mean, we have progressed around concepts, not around devices. I mean, this is very important.
This is very rich. I would say that I'd like to emphasize that because we are, as I said, humbly, but we are more physiologically honest now. We didn't know some physiological concepts or issues, or we neglected that because we didn't have insights on that. And now we have faced physiology again, and okay, let's make a deal, let's make peace. We're now talking with physiology much more. Yes.
I remember 10, 15 years ago, I have been attending the European Congresses of, this is our second home, the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine, for more than 20 years, 25 years. And I remember 10, 15 years ago, the discussion, there were a lot of lectures, speaking about new monitors to assess non-invasively cardiac output, And this is very, very repeated, frequent lectures about this. And now, not anymore. I mean, now the progress in echocardiography, I mean, is amazing in venous congestion assessment. Here is Oliver. Hi, Oliver. I mean, I don't know if you
Hello, my
agree
friends.
that the progress has been driven essentially, besides echo, especially in the evolution and the maturation of concepts, physiological concepts. I think I'm very happy because I think physiology is back. Is back. It was a little bit misty. It was a little bit lost in the
Yes.
middle of the road. But now physiology is strong and present every day. What do you think, Oliver?
I fully agree with you, and I think this is quite interesting. when I tell our junior doctors and especially and the nurses that work for 10 or 15 years in the ward, and I tell them that we do echo and we do CRT and SCVO2 again. They also ask me if I'm crazy because they because and because why should we do that again? And I have to tell them that we now recognized that we have to bring physiology to the bedside. And of course, we have done that in the past before, but I think we have just looking for a single variable and hunting for a single variable that tell us the truth. And I think this is what we have recognized during the last 10, 15, 20 years, maybe 25 years. That of course we need that, but we bring that together and we understand the whole physiological picture at the bedside. This is my opinion.
Interesting. Now the discussion is open. I don't know if other people, there are many friends and professors here in the meeting, but this is very, very important. And I see I mean, we're very happy also about the result we are still analyzing of Andromeda Pegasus, which somehow support what we did empirically, just based in physiological concepts that pulse pressure can tell us, of course, physiologically, of course, about the stroke volume. And I think when we have this big joint venture with all of you about Pegasus, some results of Pegasus will support the people to do this. And I want to emphasize, Ricardo, maybe you could emphasize this also, that since the tools that were used in Andromeda 2 are available everywhere, I mean, including echo, of course. In Andromeda 2, we didn't ask for an advanced echo, just basic echo.
Yes,
So,
basic.
Yeah, so I think that the results may be translated easily to different contexts, to different contexts around the world. It's totally contrary when progress has been driven by a new technological device where the translation to middle income resource set is very slow and economy dependent. This is now, what
Yeah, I fully agree with you. We need some. You need some skills to perform an echo that deliver you some relevant information that may be informative to you, but not profound skills. You need some sort of training to interrogate the heart with the transducer and get the information you need. And as Oliver said, I was thinking on another thing. For us, it's different because we knew the Swan-Ganz catheter, we knew everything before the full technology, the PICO device and LV and everything. It's the same for AI. We are not AI native. We are immigrants to AI, something like that. But my daughters are native, are AI native, or young physicians and residents and students are native in echo. They don't know. They never they had trouble to get a wedge pressure and trying to put the Swan-Ganz catheter in the right position and to do the equations, do the math and resistance and everything that perhaps unimportant now, but we learned the hard way. And now our tools we have for us are accessory, are important, perhaps very relevant for the acute diagnosis, the hemodynamic diagnosis of a patient that's in shock. Okay, it's a transducer again, but let's think something before putting the transducer on to anticipate what I'm going to do with what I think the patient has. Oh, it doesn't have what I thought. Okay, but it's not, oh, let's put the transducer and see what it shows. So I think we are in a very privileged position because we learned, hopefully, but we learned without these devices, without much technology. And I think that the challenge for the newer generations is to think more and rely less in the technology. That's what I think.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the translation to clinical practice. In the ARDS trial from the ARMA network, it took around 6 to 8 years for people to finally adopt the 6 to 8 ml per kilo. It was not immediate. So probably a low cost intervention like Andromeda 2 or something will also lag a little bit. I hope that with technology and training and everything, this is slower. But also we're analyzing some data that show it's still preliminary that applying the protocol also saved money, around $5,000 to $10,000 per patient. So this could also be an incentive for hospitals and for people to adopt as well these ideas, this core idea, not only physiology but also cost effectiveness. So I think it's another side of the coin that is very relevant.
I have I have an additional small question, Ricardo. You are a truly practitioner guy in physiology. You think a lot about vascular physiology. And do you think I always what are we missing yet? So for example, I would love to assess critical closing pressure,
Yeah,
the waterfall at the bedside.
That's
But
my holy grail now. Holy grail
far,
now.
how far or how close are we getting close to some technique, bedside technique, without a sophisticated device to assess this? Because this could bring us to fine tune the vasopressor the best
Yes.
map target, etc. Because now, after Andromeda 2, etc., we are relying on the vasopressor test to try to figure out if higher blood pressure is. But what do you think? Are we far? Is it like a chimera? Will we someday be able to assess this at the bedside?
No, of course not. I think we have all the technology we need. We need with the most validated surrogate technique, because the real technique would be a stop flow, a cardiac arrest, and dimension of the pressure, but it's undoable. But the most validated surrogate is the regression to zero technique, that you have 2 points with a perturbation that may be thoracic pressurization or something that lowers cardiac output. You generate 2 points and 2 pressures, and you extrapolate to zero, and that would be the zero flow pressure. It's very easy to get an algorithm embedded in a monitor that performs the regression bit to bit and generate the 2 points would be a moment of test. And let's increase PIP by 5, let's decrease PIP by 5, and you have 2 or 3 points, and you can do that. I think it's a matter of interest from the industry, but because the technique is well validated. The point is that it still does not have a clinical and questionable utility. It has a theoretical utility. But there are some papers now that resuscitating the waterfall, as Pierre Gregoire Guinaud published a few years ago, it perhaps seems to be the right way to titrate norepinephrine, for instance. But I think we are very close to that. But we need to get more background, more solid bunch of papers that will allow us, okay, let's press the industry to get this way of calculate this new parameter, and we should standardize the perturbation plus 5 pip and less 5, and okay, the 2 points, and the steady was the third point, okay, regression, this, bit to bit. You could do this. And the Chandrasekhar paper in Nature Medicine 2 years ago used data from a database. So the respiratory variation when you inspire or expire was enough for them to have these 2 points to regress to 0. So of course you have to get rid of the, you need to get rid of the outliers. You need an algorithm for that. But I think we have the technology to do that.
Great. Okay, that's great. I mean, thank you very much for being here. I think this.
We apologize for the technical inconvenience.
No, the technical. I mean, of course, we learned a lot today. Of course, there's a little bit of small talk in the last couple of minutes. We committed a mistake probably today because we sent mails to all the principal investigators of the centers that participated in Andromeda. But now we realize with Eduardo that we have the delegation logs. We have all the people that participated in the whole teams. And we will, with the aid of our university technical educational department for the next session, we will send professional mails to everybody, to all the investigators. We are far more than 1,000, maybe 2,000 people, so they will be able to join us. Anyway, we will put this video in YouTube, and we will share, because I think the lecture was great, and we will grow up. And finally, I think what Eduardo just mentioned, the Andromeda Horizons, which is the big next project around the world that will have, we will do that, Olga. And what we will have, this is a worldwide study with different levels, multi-level, which a registry for everybody, and people that have more advanced, for example, people that can perform echo 24/7, advanced echo, blah, blah, blah. We will do also in parallel some mechanistic studies in refractory shock. We got a big success in incorporating CRT as a criterion for refractory septic shock, the trajectories, etc. We will do this, and I'm very optimistic that this will be the next big project, this, besides all that you can propose. The next activities next week, we will share the newsletter with the link to the YouTube of this presentation. Also, the standard operating procedure to apply for endorsement of the network, etc. And the last Wednesday of May, this is the 25th, I think. We will send information soon enough. Olga Hamsaoui from Reims, which is our leader, one of our biggest researchers here. She will the next lecture will be about bedside assessment of vascular tone, which is also very, very important issue.
Very good.
So thank you very much again for being here. And that's it.
Thank you.
Eduardo,
yes.
You want to?
No, sorry again for the technical caveats. we had some, but we're learning. We're learning together.
We are learning.
Yeah. We will improve for the next one. So
we were very angry with ourselves this morning because they said, "Wow, how can we be so stupid? We did not use the web." But we will be a webinar then we raise it and set. So, so I'm
Thank you.
sorry that Lara just connected, but just finishing because maybe it's also we have another enemy, which is the time zone difference. Because in China at this moment is 10 p.m. and it was very difficult to try to standardize.
And Colombia 7.
And Colombia 7, and also the problem is that in summer and winter there's deep changes in time zones, and there is a lot of confusion even for us. But the next time we will take care. Thank you very much for
Thank you,
being
Ricardo.
here.
Great lecture.
Thank you,
Thank you, Ricardo.
Joao.
Yeah,
Thank you,
great.
people.
Good to see you. Thank you so much for
Rook.
being
It's
here.
nice to meet once a month. No, I think it's.
And thanks, Ben. Thanks, Eduardo.
Thanks, Oliver.
Very well done.
San Ruth, San Joao, San Filippo, etc. Thank you, friends.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye.